The video started innocently enough. Blue ocean waves, white sand beaches, and palm trees swaying in the Hawaiian breeze. Then the camera turned and Zara's world collapsed. "Look at this view," her husband Brandon's voice came through her phone speaker, but he wasn't talking about the sunset. He was pointing the camera at himself and another woman. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the woman giggling beside him on the beach. It was Patricia, her mother-in-law. But Patricia wasn't just standing there. She was wrapped in Brandon's arms, kissing him like she was his girlfriend, not his mother. Zara's hands trembled as she held the phone, watching her 28-year-old husband make out with his 53-year-old stepmother while Hawaiian music played in the background. "God, I'm so glad we finally got away from that pathetic situation," Patricia's voice came through clearly. "Poor little Zara, stuck at home playing nurse to a vegetable. She has no idea what she's missing." Brandon laughed, the sound cutting through Zara like glass. "She's so devoted to Dad, it's almost sad. Sitting there all day talking to him like he can understand her. At least it keeps her busy while we're having fun. The best part is she actually thinks you love her," Patricia said, running her fingers through Brandon's hair. "If only she knew how long we've been together. 2 years of sneaking around and she never suspected a thing. 2 years." Zara's knees gave out and she sank onto the kitchen chair. 2 years meant they'd been together since before Charles's accident. Since before she'd given up her job as a graphic designer to care for her father-in-law full-time. Since before she'd sacrificed everything to help this family through their darkest time. The video continued, and Zara watched in horror as Brandon and Patricia detailed their plans. How they'd convinced her that Charles needed constant care. How they'd made her feel guilty for even suggesting outside help. How they'd used her compassion against her while they lived it up on vacation after vacation. "The old man's birthday party would have been so boring anyway," Brandon said, adjusting his sunglasses. "Sitting around pretending to celebrate someone who can't even remember his own name. This is way better. Plus, now we don't have to pretend anymore," Patricia added. "At least not when we're alone. When we get back, we can start working on the next phase." "What's the next phase?" Brandon asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Getting him into a facility, of course. Then we can sell the house and really start our life together. Maybe move somewhere warm like this permanently." Zara's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. The house Patricia was talking about was Charles's house, the family home where Brandon had grown up, where Zara had lived since marrying into the family 3 years ago. The house that was supposed to be her security, her future. The video kept playing, showing them at restaurants, on beaches, in hotel rooms that probably cost more than Zara spent on groceries in a month. All while she'd been home, alone, caring for a man who'd become like a father to her. All while she'd been missing her own father's birthday dinner because someone needed to stay with Charles. "Send this to Zara," she heard Patricia say off camera. "I want her to see what a real vacation looks like. Maybe it'll motivate her to get a life." The video ended abruptly, leaving Zara staring at a black screen that reflected her tear-streaked face. Her beautiful dark skin looked ashen, her usually bright eyes were red and swollen. She looked like a ghost of herself. For a moment, she sat in complete silence. The house felt different now, like the walls themselves had shifted. Everything she thought she knew about her life, her marriage, her family, had been a lie. The man she'd loved and trusted had been betraying her for 2 years. The woman she'd tried so hard to please, who'd never seemed to warm up to her, had been stealing her husband. But what hurt most was how they'd used her love for Charles against her. She genuinely cared about her father-in-law. When he'd had his accident 2 years ago, leaving him paralyzed and unable to speak, she hadn't hesitated to step up. She'd quit her job, put her dreams on hold, and dedicated herself to his care because she believed family meant something. Now she realized they'd all been laughing at her behind her back. A soft sound from the living room broke through her thoughts. Charles was awake, probably wondering where everyone was. He'd been expecting his birthday dinner tonight. Zara had planned a small celebration, just the family, his favorite cake, maybe some music from his younger days. Instead, his wife and son were in Hawaii, mocking him and planning to throw him away like garbage. Zara wiped her eyes and walked to the living room where Charles sat in his wheelchair, looking out the window. His gray hair was neatly combed, and she dressed him in his favorite blue shirt that morning. He looked dignified despite everything, and her heart broke for him all over again. "Hey Charles," she said softly, kneeling beside his chair. "I'm sorry about dinner. They're not coming back tonight." For a second she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. A flash of understanding that seemed too clear for someone with severe brain damage. But then it was gone and she figured she was just seeing what she wanted to see. Don't worry, she whispered, taking his hand. We'll figure this out together. She had no idea how right she was. Zara had always been a morning person, but these days she woke up before dawn out of necessity. Charles needed medication at 6 a.m., breakfast by 7, and physical therapy exercises throughout the day. The routine had become second nature over the past 2 years, but this morning felt different. Everything felt different after that video. She moved quietly through the house, preparing Charles's breakfast and arranging his medications. The doctors had been clear about his condition after the accident. Severe spinal cord injury, partial brain damage from lack of oxygen, limited motor function, and minimal cognitive awareness. He needed round-the-clock care, they said. He might never improve, they warned. Brandon and Patricia had been so concerned, so worried about giving him the best care possible. Now Zara realized their concern had been about getting her to provide free full-time nursing so they could live their lives without responsibility. "Good morning, Charles," she said as she entered his room. He was already awake, sitting up in bed with an alertness that always surprised her. His dark eyes followed her movements as she approached with his breakfast tray. "Let's get you ready for the day," she continued, helping him into his wheelchair. He was a tall man, probably 6'2" in his prime, and still maintained good muscle tone despite his supposed paralysis. Sometimes Zara wondered how someone who couldn't move had such strong arms and shoulders, but the doctors had explained something about muscle memory and residual nerve function. As she helped him with breakfast, Zara found herself really looking at Charles for the first time in months. His movements weren't completely absent. He could hold a spoon with guidance, turn his head when she spoke, even make soft sounds that might be attempts at communication. But 2 years of caring for him had made these interactions automatic. She'd stopped really seeing him as a person and started seeing him as a patient. "Charles," she said suddenly, setting down his juice glass. "Do you understand what I'm saying? Can you hear me?" His eyes met hers directly, and for a moment she felt like he was really there, really listening. His mouth moved slightly and she leaned closer. "I know this is probably silly," she continued, "but I found out some things yesterday. About Brandon and Patricia. About what they've been doing while I've been here taking care of you." Charles's hand twitched on the wheelchair armrest. Zara noticed his breathing had changed slightly, become more focused. "They've been lying to both of us," she said, her voice breaking. "They've been together for 2 years, Charles. Your wife and your son. And they want to put you in a home so they can sell this house and run away together." This time, Charles's reaction was unmistakable. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists, and a low sound came from his throat that sounded almost like anger. "Charles?" Zara whispered. "Did you understand that?" For a long moment, they stared at each other. Zara felt like she was seeing him clearly for the first time since his accident. His eyes weren't vacant or confused. They were sharp, intelligent, and filled with something that looked like fury. But then the moment passed. Charles's expression went blank again, his hands relaxed, and he returned to the passive state she was used to. Zara sat back, wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. The rest of the morning followed their usual routine. She helped him with exercises, read him the newspaper, and played some of his favorite music from the 1980s. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She kept catching him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, and his responses to her voice seemed more immediate than usual. By afternoon, Zara was exhausted. The emotional weight of Brandon's betrayal combined with the physical demands of caregiving had drained her completely. She settled Charles in the living room for his afternoon rest and collapsed on the couch nearby. "I don't know what to do," she said aloud, not really talking to anyone in particular. "I gave up everything for this family. My job, my friends, my dreams. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought love meant sacrifice." She looked over at Charles, who appeared to be sleeping peacefully in his chair. "The worst part is I still care about you," she continued. "Even knowing what they've done, I can't just abandon you. But I can't keep living this lie either. I can't keep pretending everything is normal when my whole life has been a joke." A tear rolled down her cheek and she wiped it away angrily. She'd cried enough over Brandon and Patricia. They didn't deserve her tears. "Maybe I should just leave," she whispered. "Pack my things and go back to my old apartment. Let them deal with the consequences of their choices." As soon as she said it, she knew she couldn't do it. Whatever Brandon and Patricia had done, Charles was innocent. He was a victim too, maybe even more than she was. At least she could fight back. He was trapped in a body that wouldn't respond, dependent on people who wanted to discard him. "I won't let them hurt you," she said firmly, looking at his sleeping form. "I don't know how yet, but I'll figure something out. We'll figure something out." She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, it was getting dark outside. Charles was still in his chair, but something was different. His position had changed slightly, and his blanket had shifted. Zara frowned, trying to remember exactly how she'd left him. "Charles?" she called softly. "Are you awake?" His eyes opened immediately, too immediately for someone who'd been deeply asleep. And there was something in his expression that made her heart race. Intelligence, awareness, and something that looked almost like conspiracy. "Charles," she said slowly, moving closer to his chair. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to give me an honest answer somehow. Can you understand everything I've been saying to you?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then, so slowly she almost missed it, Charles nodded. It was barely a movement, just a slight dip of his chin, but it was unmistakably deliberate. Zara's breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered. "How long have you been able to understand?" Charles's eyes moved toward the kitchen, then back to her. He was trying to tell her something, but she didn't understand what. "The kitchen?" she asked. "Do you want to go to the kitchen?" Another tiny nod. Zara's hands shook as she unlocked his wheelchair brakes and pushed him toward the kitchen. Her mind was racing with questions and possibilities. If Charles could understand, if he'd been aware this whole time, what did that mean? What had he seen? What did he know? As they reached the kitchen table, Charles lifted his hand with obvious effort and pointed toward a drawer. The junk drawer where they kept pens, notepads, and random household items. "You want to write something?" Zara asked, pulling out a notepad and pen. Charles nodded again, and this time his nod was stronger, more confident. Zara placed the pen in his hand and held the notepad steady. His writing was shaky but readable. "Not safe to talk here. Tonight. Midnight. My room." Zara stared at the words, her heart pounding. Charles was not only aware he was planning something. And if he was worried about being safe to talk, that meant he knew more about their situation than she'd ever imagined. "I'll be there," she whispered. Charles nodded once more, then let the pen fall from his hand and slumped back into his passive pose. To anyone watching, he would look like a man struggling with basic motor functions, not someone who'd just written a coherent message. The rest of the evening crawled by. Zara went through the motions of their usual routine, but her mind was spinning. At midnight, she would finally learn the truth about what had been happening in this house. And something told her that truth was going to change everything. Midnight felt like it would never come. Zara sat in her bedroom, watching the clock and trying to process what had happened in the kitchen. Charles could understand. Charles could communicate. And Charles had something important enough to risk exposure in order to tell her. At 11:58 p.m., she crept out of her room and down the hallway to Charles's bedroom. The house was silent except for the usual creaks and settling sounds of an old home. She slipped inside his room and closed the door quietly behind her. Charles was waiting for her, sitting up in bed with an alertness she'd never seen before. In the dim light from his bedside lamp, he looked like a completely different person. His posture was straight, his eyes were focused and intelligent, and there was a strength in his expression that took her breath away. "Hello, Zara," he said clearly, his voice strong and sure. Zara nearly fell over. "You can talk." "I can do a lot more than that," Charles said, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "But we need to be very careful. They have security cameras in the main rooms, and Patricia checks the footage sometimes when they're away." "Security cameras?" Zara's head was spinning. "Charles, what's going on? How long have you been able to walk, talk, think clearly?" Charles stood up slowly, his movements careful but steady. "Since about 6 months after my accident. The paralysis was real at first, but I recovered much faster than anyone expected. When I started getting my mobility back, I realized some very interesting things were happening around me." Zara sank into the chair beside his bed, staring at him in amazement. Charles was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and kind eyes that were now sharp with intelligence and purpose. "I heard them talking," he continued, beginning to pace slowly around the room. "Brandon and Patricia. They thought I was brain damaged, unable to understand anything. So they talked freely in front of me. I learned about their affair, their plans, their theft." "Theft?" Zara whispered. "They've been stealing from me for over a year," Charles said grimly. "Patricia has access to my accounts as my medical power of attorney. She's been transferring money to accounts she controls, bit by bit, thinking I'd never notice. Brandon has been forging my signature on documents, including a new will that leaves everything to him and cuts out my sister and her children." Zara felt sick. "How much have they stolen?" "Nearly $200,000 so far," Charles said. Plus they've taken out a second mortgage on this house without my knowledge. They're bleeding me dry, and they plan to finish the job by having me declared mentally incompetent and moved to a state facility. Why didn't you expose them earlier? Why keep pretending? Charles sat down on the edge of his bed, his expression serious. Because I needed evidence. Real, undeniable proof that would stand up in court. And because I needed to understand the full scope of their plan. If I'd revealed myself too early, they might have found other ways to achieve their goals. He pulled a small device from under his mattress. Hidden recorder, he explained. I've been documenting everything for months. Conversations, phone calls, their private moments when they think I can't hear or understand. I have hours of audio that prove their fraud, their conspiracy, and their intent to abandon me. Charles, this is incredible, Zara said. But why tell me now? Why not just go to the police yourself? Because they've made you part of their plan whether you know it or not, Charles said seriously. In their conversations they've been discussing how to get rid of you too. They plan to claim you've been abusing me, that you're mentally unstable from the stress of caregiving. They want to destroy your reputation so badly that no one will believe you if you try to expose them. Zara's blood went cold. They want to frame me? Patricia has been documenting supposed incidents, Charles nodded. False she claims you caused, medications she says you forgot to give me, times when she alleges you left me alone for hours. It's all lies, but she's building a paper trail that could be used against you. I would never hurt you, Zara said, her voice breaking. I know that, Charles said gently. You've been the only person in this house who's treated me with genuine kindness and respect. Even when you thought I couldn't understand, you talked to me like I was human. You've been taking better care of me than my own family. Tears filled Zara's eyes. I can't believe they would do this. I mean, I saw the video, I know about the affair, but to try to destroy my life too. They see you as a threat, Charles explained. You know too much about their schedules, their absences, their behavior. And Brandon is worried you might start asking questions about finances when they try to move me to a facility. So they need to discredit you completely. What do we do? Zara asked. How do we stop them? Charles smiled for the first time since their conversation began, and it transformed his entire face. We're going to beat them at their own game. But it's going to require some acting on both our parts, and absolute secrecy until we're ready to move. What kind of acting? You're going to have to keep pretending everything is normal when they get back from Hawaii, Charles said. No matter how angry you are, no matter how much you want to confront them, you have to act like the devoted wife and daughter-in-law they expect you to be. And you? I'm going to get worse, Charles said with a grim smile. Much worse. I'm going to become so disabled, so needy, that they accelerate their timeline. The more urgent they feel about getting rid of me, the more mistakes they'll make. That sounds dangerous, Zara worried. It is, Charles admitted. But it's our best chance to catch them in the act with witnesses present. I have a plan, Zara, but I need your help to make it work. Tell me. For the next hour, Charles laid out a detailed strategy that was both simple and brilliant. They would gather more evidence, set up the perfect trap, and expose Brandon and Patricia in a way that would destroy their credibility completely while protecting both Zara and Charles. One more thing, Charles said as their meeting was coming to an end. I need you to know something about yourself. What do you mean? You're stronger than you think, he said seriously. You've been told you're weak, dependent, that you need them to take care of you. But that's not true. You've been taking care of everyone else. You gave up your career to help our family. You've been managing a household, providing medical care, and handling responsibilities that would overwhelm most people. Zara felt tears welling up again, but these were different tears. These were tears of recognition, of finally being seen for who she really was. When this is over, Charles continued, you're going to have choices. Real choices about your life and your future. And I want you to remember that you're capable of anything you set your mind to. Thank you, Zara whispered. For trusting me with this. For including me in your plan. Thank you, Charles replied, for reminding me what real family looks like. As Zara crept back to her room, she felt different than she had in years. She had purpose now and allies, and most importantly, she had hope. Brandon and Patricia thought they were so clever, so much smarter than everyone around them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, Zara woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since watching that horrible video, she knew exactly what she needed to do. Charles was counting on her, and she wasn't going to let him down. She went through their morning routine as usual, but everything felt different now. When she helped Charles with breakfast, she was really helping a partner in their mission. When she spoke to him throughout the day, she knew he was listening and understanding every word. The isolation she'd felt for so long was gone. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," she said quietly as she arranged his afternoon medications. "About the evidence we need to gather. Do you think they'll make more mistakes when they get back?" Charles, maintaining his blank expression for any cameras, managed a slight nod. "I want to learn everything," Zara continued. "About the financial theft, the forged documents, all of it. If we're going to do this, I want to do it right." That evening, when she was certain they were alone, Zara returned to Charles's room. This time he was ready with a stack of documents hidden in a storage box under his bed. "I've been gathering these for months," he explained, spreading papers across his bedspread. "Bank statements, forged signatures, medical documents with false information. Look at this." He handed her a bank statement from 6 months ago. "Patricia withdrew $15,000 on a day when she told you she was visiting her sister in Portland. But look at this credit card statement from the same week." Zara examined the papers. She was in Las Vegas. "These hotel and restaurant charges are all from Vegas." "Exactly. And here's the really interesting part." Charles pulled out another document. "She claimed that withdrawal was for my medical expenses. Specifically, for a consultation with a specialist in Portland about experimental treatments. But she was gambling in Vegas instead," Zara said, feeling sick. "It gets worse," Charles said grimly. "Look at this series of withdrawals from Brandon's business account." Zara studied the pattern. "He's been taking money from his construction company. These amounts? Charles, this is embezzlement. $23,000 over 8 months, Charles confirmed. Money that was supposed to go to his employees' benefits and workers' compensation. He's been stealing from people who depend on those benefits to feed their families." The scope of their betrayal was overwhelming. It wasn't just personal, they were hurting innocent people whose only crime was trusting Brandon with their livelihoods. "There's more," Charles said, pulling out a folder marked medical records. "Look at these reports Patricia submitted to my insurance company." Zara read through the documents, her anger growing with each page. "She's claiming you're completely unresponsive. That you can't feed yourself, can't communicate, can't recognize people. She's billing insurance for services you don't even need. She's been collecting payments for 24-hour skilled nursing care," Charles said. "Care that you've been providing for free. She's essentially been selling your labor to insurance companies and keeping the money. How much money are we talking about? Over the past 2 years? Probably close to $300,000 in fraudulent claims," Charles said. "Insurance fraud is a federal crime, Zara. This isn't just theft, it's a felony that could send them to prison for years." Zara sank back in her chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of their crimes. "How did you figure all this out? How did you get these documents?" Charles smiled slightly. "I wasn't always a retired insurance adjuster, Zara. Before I married Patricia, I spent 20 years as a police detective. I know how to investigate financial crimes and I know how to build a case that will stick." "You're a former police detective?" Zara stared at him in amazement. "Fraud division, specifically," Charles nodded. "I've seen cases like this before, but I never thought I'd be the victim of one. Patricia knew about my background, which is why she was so careful to make sure I appeared completely incapacitated. If I seemed aware at all, she'd know I might be putting the pieces together." "Do you still have contacts in the police department?" "Some," Charles said. "But we need to be careful about how we approach this. Patricia has been very smart about creating documentation that supports her story. On paper, it looks like she's been a devoted wife caring for a severely disabled husband. If we go to the police without ironclad evidence, it could backfire." "What kind of evidence do we need?" Charles pulled out his hidden recorder. "This device has captured dozens of hours of their private conversations. But audio alone might not be enough. We need to catch them in the act of committing new crimes with witnesses present." "How do we do that?" "We set up a situation where they'll be forced to reveal themselves," Charles explained. "Patricia has been pressuring Brandon to move faster on having me declared incompetent. She wants me out of this house so they can sell it and disappear with the money. So we make them think they need to act quickly?" "Exactly. But first we need to understand their full plan. Tonight, I want you to look through Patricia's personal items. Her computer, her phone if you can access it, any paperwork she keeps in her bedroom." Zara felt nervous about the idea of searching through Patricia's belongings. What if she has cameras in her room too? "She doesn't," Charles said confidently. "I've been watching her behavior patterns for months. She only checks the cameras in the common areas, and only when she's worried about something specific. Her bedroom is her private space. Okay, Zara agreed. What am I looking for? Any evidence of additional accounts, travel plans, communications with lawyers or medical professionals. And specifically, look for anything related to power of attorney documents or legal guardianship paperwork. Legal guardianship? If they can have me declared mentally incompetent, Patricia becomes my legal guardian with complete control over my finances and medical decisions, Charles explained. It's the final step in their plan. Once that happens, they can liquidate everything I own and there would be nothing I could do to stop them. The weight of responsibility settled on Zara's shoulders. She wasn't just helping to expose an affair anymore, she was helping to prevent the complete destruction of Charles's life and the theft of everything he'd worked for. I won't let them do this to you, she said firmly. I know you won't, Charles replied. But Zara, I need you to understand something. When we expose them, your life is going to change completely. Your marriage will be over, your living situation will change, and you'll need to rebuild your entire life. I understand. Do you? Charles asked seriously. Because once we start down this path, there's no going back. They'll try to destroy you in every way they can. Are you prepared for that? Zara thought about the question carefully. 2 days ago, she would have been terrified at the prospect of losing her marriage and her home. But now, knowing what her marriage really was, the idea of losing it felt more like freedom than loss. Yes, she said. I'm ready. Good, Charles smiled. Because tomorrow Brandon and Patricia come home from Hawaii. And that's when the real work begins. As Zara prepared to leave his room, Charles caught her hand gently. Zara, he said, I want you to know that whatever happens, you've already proven yourself to be the strongest person in this house. Don't let them make you forget that. Walking back to her room, Zara felt a strange combination of fear and excitement. In less than 24 hours, she would have to look Brandon and Patricia in the eye and pretend she didn't know the truth about them. She would have to smile and act happy to see them while knowing they were planning to destroy her life. But she also knew she wasn't facing this alone anymore. She had an ally, a plan, and most importantly, she had the truth on her side. Brandon and Patricia had underestimated her for the last time. Brandon and Patricia's flight was scheduled to land at 3:47 p.m. Zara spent the morning preparing for their return, but her preparations weren't what they appeared to be. While she cleaned the house and organized their belongings, she was actually searching for evidence and preparing for the performance of her life. In Patricia's bedroom, she found exactly what Charles had predicted. Hidden in a folder marked important documents were papers that made her blood run cold. A petition for legal guardianship over Charles, claiming he was mentally incompetent and dangerous to himself. Medical evaluations from doctors Zara had never heard of, stating that Charles needed to be placed in a secured facility immediately. But the most damning document was a real estate listing agreement. Patricia had already contacted an agent about selling Charles's house, with a projected sale date just 3 weeks away. They're not even waiting for the legal proceedings, she whispered to herself, photographing the documents with her phone. They're planning to just do whatever they want. She also found Patricia's laptop open to an email account Zara didn't recognize. The recent messages painted a picture of extensive planning. Travel reservations to Costa Rica for the following month. Communications with offshore banking services. Even inquiries about buying property in countries with no extradition treaties. They weren't just planning to steal from Charles and disappear. They were planning to flee the country. When she returned to Charles's room that afternoon, his reaction to the photos was immediate and serious. This changes our timeline, he said grimly. They're moving much faster than I expected. If they're planning to leave the country in a month, we have maybe 2 weeks to stop them. What do? We accelerate our plan, Charles said. And we take some risks I was hoping to avoid. He pulled out a cell phone Zara had never seen before. I've been in contact with my former partner at the police department. Detective Rodriguez is now a lieutenant in the fraud division, and he's been quietly working with me to build a case. You've already involved the police? I had to, Charles explained. Some of their crimes cross state lines, which makes them federal offenses. We need federal investigators ready to move as soon as we have enough evidence. How much more evidence do we need? We need to catch them in the act of committing a crime with multiple witnesses present, Charles said. And we need them to confess to their previous crimes on record. How are we going to do that? Charles smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. We're going to give them exactly what they want, and then we're going to watch them destroy themselves. He pulled out several papers from under his mattress. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a medical emergency. A serious decline that will require immediate intervention. You're going to call Patricia in a panic, telling her that I've become completely unresponsive and that you think I'm dying. They'll call an ambulance. No, they won't, Charles said confidently. They can't risk having real medical professionals examine me closely. Instead, they'll rush home and contact their fake doctors to confirm that I need immediate placement in a facility. How do you know they won't just call 911? Because I know Patricia, Charles said grimly. She's been waiting for this moment. She'll see it as the perfect opportunity to implement their plan without waiting for legal proceedings. But what if you're wrong? What if they do call for real medical help? Then I'll truly be sick for a few hours, Charles shrugged. I've been researching symptoms of various conditions. I can fake a convincing decline that won't actually harm me but will look alarming to someone who isn't medically trained. This is so dangerous, Charles. The whole situation is dangerous, he replied. But this is our best chance to catch them off guard. When they think I'm finally incapacitated enough to move me immediately, they'll stop being careful. They'll make mistakes. What's my role in all this? You're going to be the concerned caregiver who's in over her head, Charles explained. You'll call Patricia crying, telling her you don't know what to do, that you're scared and need her help immediately. Play into their perception of you as weak and dependent. And then we wait for them to reveal their true plan. With any luck, they'll bring their fake medical professionals here to confirm my condition. Detective Rodriguez will be monitoring the situation, and we'll have everything on record. What if they get suspicious? What if they realize you're faking? They won't, Charles said confidently, because they want to believe it's real. They've been waiting 2 years for me to become helpless enough that they can move me without resistance. They're not going to question what they see as the answer to their prayers. That evening, Zara found herself alone in the house for the last time before Brandon and Patricia's return. She walked through each room, seeing everything differently now. This wasn't her home anymore. It had never really been her home. It was Charles's house, and she was just someone who'd been fooled into providing free labor while his real family plotted against him. But tomorrow that would all change. Tomorrow she and Charles would begin taking back control of their lives. She spent the evening memorizing the plan and preparing for her performance. She practiced looking panicked and helpless, rehearsed the phone calls she would need to make, and steeled herself for what was coming. At midnight, she made one final check on Charles. He was awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression of determination. "Are you ready for this?" she asked quietly. "I've been ready for 2 years," he replied. "The question is, are you ready?" "Yes," Zara said, and for the first time in months she meant it completely. "Good," Charles said. "Because tomorrow we find out just how far they're willing to go to destroy us. And then we show them exactly what happens when they underestimate the people they're trying to hurt." As Zara returned to her room, she felt a strange sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, danger, and the end of life as she'd known it. But it would also bring truth, justice, and the beginning of something better. Brandon and Patricia thought they were coming home to continue their perfect deception. Instead, they were walking into a trap that would expose them completely. The waiting was almost over. Brandon and Patricia arrived home at 6:30 p.m., their skin bronzed from the Hawaiian sun and their luggage full of evidence of their betrayal. Zara met them at the door with a smile that felt like it might crack her face in half. "Welcome home," she said brightly, hugging Brandon as though she hadn't seen him making out with his stepmother less than 48 hours ago. "How was your business trip?" "Exhausting but productive," Brandon replied smoothly, kissing her cheek with lips that had been kissing another woman. "The conferences were really intense. How's Dad?" "About the same," Zara said, playing her role perfectly. "He had a good birthday. I made him his favorite cake and he seemed to enjoy the music." Patricia emerged from the kitchen where she'd been checking something on her phone. "That's sweet, dear. I'm sure he appreciated having someone here with him." The condescension in her voice was thick, but Zara just smiled. "He's lucky to have such a caring family." Over dinner, Brandon and Patricia regaled her with stories of their separate business activities in Hawaii. Brandon claimed he'd been attending construction conferences, while Patricia said she'd been at healthcare management seminars. They'd prepared their lies carefully, but Zara noticed the small inconsistencies. The matching tan lines. The way they both mentioned the same restaurants and beaches. The identical souvenirs they'd supposedly bought independently. "I brought you something," Brandon said, handing her a small box. Inside was a cheap shell necklace that probably cost less than $10. "It's beautiful," Zara lied, putting it on. "Thank you for thinking of me." "I brought something for Charles too," Patricia added, producing an equally cheap Hawaiian shirt. "Maybe you can help him wear it tomorrow." The gesture was so hollow, so obviously an afterthought, that Zara had to bite her tongue to keep from responding sarcastically. Instead, she thanked Patricia and excused herself to check on Charles. She found him in his wheelchair in the living room, maintaining his vacant expression perfectly even though she could see the intelligence burning in his eyes. She knelt beside him and spoke loudly enough for Brandon and Patricia to hear from the kitchen. "Look what Patricia brought you from Hawaii, Charles. A beautiful shirt. Maybe we'll try it on you tomorrow." Charles's only response was a soft grunt, but she caught the slight tightening around his eyes that told her he was listening to every word coming from the kitchen. "Zara really is devoted to him," she heard Patricia say to Brandon. "It's almost admirable how she sacrificed her whole life for someone who can't even recognize her anymore." "She doesn't have much else going for her," Brandon replied cruelly. "No job, no real friends, no prospects. Taking care of Dad gives her life meaning." "Still, it might be time to start thinking about professional care," Patricia said carefully. "Zara's been doing this for 2 years. That kind of stress can't be healthy for anyone." Zara's hands clenched into fists, but she kept her voice gentle as she adjusted Charles's blanket. "Don't worry about what they're saying," she whispered, so quietly only he could hear. "Tomorrow we show them exactly how wrong they are about both of us." The rest of the evening followed a familiar pattern. Brandon showered and settled in to watch TV, while Patricia made phone calls she claimed were work-related. Zara went through Charles's bedtime routine, helping him to bed and making sure he was comfortable. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she whispered as she turned off his light. "More ready than I've been for anything in years," he replied quietly. "What time should I make the call?" "Wait until they're both here and settled. Maybe around 10 a.m. That gives them time to get comfortable and think everything is normal." "And you're sure about the symptoms?" "I've been practicing," Charles said grimly. "By the time I'm done, they'll be convinced I'm at death's door." The next morning, Zara woke up with her heart racing. Today was the day everything would change. She went through their normal morning routine, serving Brandon breakfast and getting Charles ready for the day. But underneath her calm exterior, she was counting down the minutes until 10 a.m. At 9:45, she positioned Charles in the living room where both Brandon and Patricia could see him clearly. Then she went to the kitchen and took several deep breaths, preparing for the performance of her life. At exactly 10 a.m., Charles began his act. It started with a low moan that echoed through the house. Zara rushed to the living room to find Charles slumped in his wheelchair, his head lolling to one side and his breathing shallow and irregular. "Charles," she cried loud enough to bring Brandon and Patricia running. "Charles, can you hear me?" Brandon appeared first, followed quickly by Patricia. They both stopped short when they saw Charles's condition. "What happened?" Patricia demanded, but Zara could hear the excitement beneath her concern. "I don't know," Zara said, her voice cracking with perfectly performed panic. "He was fine an hour ago and then he started making these sounds and now he won't respond at all." Charles's breathing became more labored, and a thin line of drool escaped the corner of his mouth. His eyes had rolled back slightly, showing mostly white, and his hands hung limply from the wheelchair armrests. "Should I call 911? Zara asked, reaching for her phone. "No," Patricia said quickly, then caught herself. Let me check him first. I have medical training, remember?" Patricia knelt beside Charles's wheelchair and began a cursory examination. Zara watched her face carefully and saw exactly what Charles had predicted. Relief. Satisfaction. The look of someone whose prayers had finally been answered. "His pulse is weak and irregular," Patricia announced, though Zara noticed she barely checked it. "His pupils aren't responding normally. This looks like a serious neurological event." "What does that mean?" Zara asked, playing her role perfectly. "It means his condition has deteriorated significantly," Patricia said, standing up. "Brandon, we need to call Dr. Morrison immediately." Zara had never heard of Dr. Morrison, which meant he was probably one of their fake medical professionals. "Who's Dr. Morrison?" "A specialist I've been consulting with about Charles's case," Patricia lied smoothly. "He's been expecting something like this might happen." Brandon was already on his phone. "Dr. Morrison? It's Brandon Pierce. We have an emergency with my father." "Yes, exactly what you predicted. How soon can you be here?" As Brandon spoke to the mysterious doctor, Patricia put her arm around Zara in a gesture of false comfort. "Don't worry, dear," she said. "We'll take care of everything. This isn't your fault. You've been doing everything you could, but Charles's condition was always going to worsen eventually. But what if he—" Zara let her voice trail off as if she couldn't bear to finish the sentence. "He's not going to die," Patricia said, but her tone suggested she wasn't particularly worried about that possibility. But this does mean he needs immediate professional care. The kind of care that only a specialized facility can provide. Dr. Morrison can be here in an hour, Brandon announced, hanging up his phone. He's bringing the paperwork for emergency placement. Emergency placement? Zara repeated. Charles needs to be in a medical facility where they can monitor him properly, Patricia explained. This house isn't equipped for someone in his condition. But I can take care of him, Zara protested weakly. I've been taking care of him for 2 years. And you've done wonderfully, Patricia said patronizingly. But this is beyond what any family caregiver can handle. Charles needs professional help now. As they waited for the mysterious Dr. Morrison to arrive, Zara watched Brandon and Patricia carefully. They were trying to appear concerned and sorrowful, but she could see their excitement. They thought they were finally getting what they wanted. They had no idea that Detective Rodriguez was already positioned outside the house, recording everything through the surveillance equipment Charles had secretly installed. They had no idea that every word they'd spoken in the past hour was being documented as evidence. And they had no idea that Charles was about to give them the surprise of their lives. Dr. Morrison arrived exactly on time, carrying a medical bag and a briefcase full of official-looking documents. He was a thin, nervous man who kept glancing around as though he expected to be caught at any moment. Which Zara realized he probably was. Dr. Morrison was not what Zara had expected. She'd imagined someone slick and professional, a criminal mastermind in a white coat. Instead, the man who entered Charles's house was nervous, sweaty, and kept checking his watch as though he wanted to be anywhere else. "Where is the patient?" he asked immediately, barely acknowledging introductions. "In the living room," Patricia said, leading him to Charles. "His condition deteriorated rapidly this morning, just as you predicted it might." Dr. Morrison knelt beside Charles's wheelchair and began what looked like a medical examination. But Zara, watching carefully, noticed he wasn't actually checking anything meaningful. He listened to Charles's chest with a stethoscope for about 5 seconds, shined a light in his eyes without really looking at the response, and checked his pulse so briefly that he couldn't possibly have gotten an accurate reading. "Significant neurological decline," he announced after less than 2 minutes. "Complete loss of cognitive function. He needs immediate placement in a secured facility." "How immediate?" Brandon asked. "Today," Dr. Morrison replied, pulling forms from his briefcase. "I've brought the necessary paperwork for emergency commitment. As his wife, Patricia, you can sign these documents and we can have him transferred within the hour." Zara felt her heart racing, but not from fear. This was at the moment Charles had been waiting for. They were about to commit multiple felonies in front of witnesses, and they had no idea they were being recorded. "Wait," Zara said, playing her part. "Shouldn't we get a second opinion? Maybe take him to the hospital for proper tests." Dr. Morrison's nervousness increased visibly. "That would be a waste of time and resources. I've been monitoring his case for months. This decline was inevitable." "But you've never examined him before today," Zara pointed out innocently. "I've been reviewing his medical records extensively," Dr. Morrison said quickly. "Patricia has been keeping me informed of his condition." "What medical records?" Zara asked, still playing dumb. "I don't remember you ever requesting any records from his regular doctors." Patricia stepped in smoothly. "Dr. Morrison has been consulting with Charles's neurologist." "Haven't you, doctor?" "Yes, of course," Dr. Morrison agreed, but his discomfort was obvious. "The consultation has been ongoing." "What's the name of Charles's neurologist?" Zara asked. "I'd like to call him to discuss this transfer." The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Dr. Morrison looked at Patricia desperately, while Brandon shifted uncomfortably behind them. "Dr. Stevens isn't available today," Patricia said finally. "He's out of the country at a conference." "Then maybe we should wait until he gets back," Zara suggested reasonably. "Absolutely not," Dr. Morrison said too quickly. "The patient's condition is critical. Any delay could be dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Zara pressed. "He's been stable for 2 years. "That's exactly the problem," Dr. Morrison said, his story becoming more elaborate and less believable. "This type of delayed deterioration can be catastrophic if not addressed immediately." As the conversation continued, Zara noticed Charles making subtle changes to his position. His breathing pattern shifted slightly, his facial expression altered by degrees, and his posture in the wheelchair became more natural. He was preparing for his grand reveal. "I think we should sign the papers," Brandon said suddenly. Dad's suffering and we need to do what's best for him. But the cost, Zara said, stalling for time. How much will this facility charge? Should we discuss this with the insurance company? Dr. Morrison and Patricia exchanged a look that confirmed everything Charles had suspected. The facility I'm recommending doesn't work with insurance, Dr. Morrison said. It's a private pay arrangement. How much? Zara asked. $15,000 per month, Dr. Morrison replied without hesitation. Zara did the math quickly. That's almost $200,000 per year. For how long? For as long as necessary, Patricia said impatiently. Charles, we can't put a price on proper medical care. But where will the money come from? Zara asked. That's more than most people make in a year. Charles has savings, Brandon said, and insurance policies. Plus this house could be sold if necessary. There it was. The admission Charles had been waiting for. They were planning to liquidate his entire estate to pay for fake medical care while he lived in poverty at a state facility. Actually, Dr. Morrison said, pulling out another set of papers, there's also the matter of financial guardianship. Given Charles's mental incapacity, someone needs legal authority to make financial decisions on his behalf. I'm his wife, Patricia said. Wouldn't that automatically be me? Not for major financial decisions, Dr. Morrison explained. You'll need to be appointed as his legal guardian. I've brought the necessary papers for that as well. This seems like a lot of legal decisions to make in one day, Zara said slowly. Maybe we should consult with a lawyer first. There's no time for that, Brandon snapped, his patience finally wearing thin. Dad could die while we're sitting here debating paperwork. Then maybe we should take him to a real hospital, Zara suggested again. No. Patricia said sharply, then caught herself. I mean, Dr. Morrison is perfectly qualified to handle this situation. What exactly are your qualifications, Dr. Morrison? Zara asked innocently. The question hit its target perfectly. Dr. Morrison's face went pale, and he began stuttering about credentials and certifications without actually naming any specific qualifications or institutions. You know what? Zara said, reaching for her phone. I think I should call Charles's real doctor. Dr. Peterson at City General. He'll want to know about this sudden change in condition. Don't you dare. Patricia exploded, her mask finally slipping completely. You have no right to make medical decisions for my husband. I'm not making decisions, Zara said calmly. I'm just calling his doctor. Give me that phone, Brandon demanded, stepping toward her aggressively. And that's when Charles decided he'd heard enough. I'll take the phone, he said clearly, sitting up straight in his wheelchair. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Morrison dropped his briefcase, scattering papers across the floor. Patricia's mouth fell open in shock. Brandon froze mid-step, his hand still reaching for Zara's phone. Hello, Patricia, Charles continued, his voice strong and clear. Hello, Brandon. I believe you were discussing my medical care. That's impossible, Dr. Morrison whispered. You're supposed to be brain damaged. Supposed to be? Charles repeated, standing up slowly from his wheelchair. According to whom? Patricia found her voice first. Charles, you're walking. I've been walking for over a year, Charles said calmly. I've also been listening, thinking, and remembering everything. Every conversation, every plan, every crime you've committed. This is insane, Brandon said, but his voice was shaking. Dad, you haven't spoken in 2 years. I haven't spoken to you in 2 years, Charles corrected. But I've been having wonderful conversations with Zara. She's been taking excellent care of me while you two have been stealing my money and planning to destroy my life. Dr. Morrison was backing toward the door. I don't know what's happening here, but I need to leave. Actually, Charles said, pulling out his hidden recorder, I think you'll want to stay for this next part. The recorder had been running the entire time, capturing every word of their conversation. But more importantly, it had also captured the sound of cars pulling up outside. That would be the police, Charles announced as sirens became audible in the distance. Detective Rodriguez and his federal fraud team have been monitoring this conversation. Dr. Morrison, I believe they'll be very interested in your medical credentials. Patricia and Brandon, they'll be even more interested in the financial documents you thought I couldn't understand. As police cars surrounded the house, Charles turned to Zara with a smile. I believe this is what they call checkmate. The living room erupted into chaos as police officers filled the house. Detective Rodriguez, a tall Hispanic man with kind eyes and an authoritative presence, took charge immediately. Dr. Morrison tried to run for the back door but was intercepted by 2 officers. Patricia began screaming about Charles being mentally ill and dangerous, while Brandon stood frozen in the middle of the room, his face white with shock. "Nobody move," Detective Rodriguez announced. "This is a federal investigation into insurance fraud, embezzlement and conspiracy to commit theft." "This is insane," Patricia shrieked. "My husband is having some kind of psychotic break. He's been completely disabled for 2 years." "Ma'am, we've been monitoring this situation for several weeks," Detective Rodriguez replied calmly. "We have extensive evidence of your fraudulent activities." Charles, now standing with perfect stability, walked over to his hidden storage box and began pulling out documents. "Detective Rodriguez, I believe you'll find everything you need right here." As officers began reading Miranda rights to the 3 conspirators, Zara found herself in the surreal position of watching her entire life collapse and rebuild itself simultaneously. The husband who had betrayed her was being arrested. The mother-in-law who had manipulated her was in handcuffs. And the father-in-law she'd been caring for was revealing himself to be her secret ally and protector. "Mrs. Pierce," Detective Rodriguez said, approaching Zara carefully. "Are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine," Zara said, though her voice was shaking. "Just processing everything." "We'll need to get a full statement from you," he continued. "About the care you've been providing, the financial irregularities you might have observed, and any conversations you may have overheard." "She doesn't know anything," Brandon shouted from across the room. "Zara had nothing to do with any of this." "Actually," Charles interjected, "Zara has been instrumental in documenting your crimes. She's been my partner in this investigation for the past several days." Detective Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Charles nodded. "Show him the photos, Zara." With trembling hands, Zara pulled out her phone and showed Detective Rodriguez the pictures she'd taken of Patricia's documents. The illegal real estate listings, the forged medical evaluations, the offshore banking communications. "These were taken 2 days ago," she explained. "When Charles told me what was really happening, I helped gather evidence." "Outstanding work," Detective Rodriguez said approvingly. "These photos will be crucial evidence in the federal case." As the investigation continued, more details emerged. Dr. Morrison wasn't a real doctor at all. He was a con artist who specialized in fake medical evaluations for insurance fraud schemes. He'd been working with Patricia for over a year, creating false documentation about Charles's condition to justify fraudulent insurance claims. The medical facility they'd planned to move Charles to was actually a substandard care home where he would have received minimal attention while Patricia collected massive payments from his insurance. Meanwhile, his real assets would have been liquidated and transferred to accounts Patricia controlled. "How much money are we talking about total?" Detective Rodriguez asked Charles. "Between the direct theft from my accounts, the fraudulent insurance claims, and the planned liquidation of my assets, probably close to $800,000, Charles replied grimly. "And that's not counting what Brandon stole from his construction company," Zara added. "Or the money they spent on their trips together." Brandon's embezzlement from his own company turned out to be even more extensive than Charles had initially discovered. He'd been stealing from employee benefit funds, workers' compensation accounts, and client deposits for over 18 months. Several families had been left without medical coverage because Brandon had pocketed their insurance premiums. "The scope of this conspiracy is remarkable," Detective Rodriguez told Charles as they reviewed the evidence. "How did you manage to document all of this without them realizing?" 20 years as a detective teaches you a few things," Charles replied. "Plus, they made the mistake of thinking I was helpless. They got careless." "And Zara's involvement was voluntary?" "Completely," Charles confirmed. "When she discovered their affair through that video, she came to me for help understanding what was happening. I realized she was in just as much danger as I was." "What kind of danger?" Detective Rodriguez asked Zara. "They were planning to frame me for abuse and neglect," Zara explained. "Patricia had been documenting fake incidents to make it look like I was harming Charles. They wanted to discredit me so badly that no one would believe me if I tried to expose them." "Show him the fake incident reports," Charles suggested. Zara pulled out copies of documents she'd found in Patricia's files. Report after report of supposed negligence, abuse, and incompetence, all fabricated to destroy Zara's credibility and reputation. "This is premeditation," Detective Rodriguez said grimly. "They weren't just stealing money, they were systematically destroying both of your lives." As the afternoon wore on, more evidence came to light. Patricia had been running other scams as well, including a fake charity that collected donations for disabled veterans. She'd been keeping the money and using it to fund her lifestyle with Brandon. The offshore accounts contained over $200,000 in stolen funds, and there were travel reservations and property inquiries in 3 different countries with no extradition treaties to the United States. They were planning to disappear completely, Detective Rodriguez told Charles and Zara. Probably within the next few weeks. What happens now? Zara asked. Now we build an airtight federal case, Detective Rodriguez replied. Insurance fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, elder abuse, identity theft. They're looking at decades in prison if convicted. And Dr. Morrison? He's already talking, Detective Rodriguez said with satisfaction. Apparently he's been involved in similar schemes with other families. His cooperation will help us identify more victims and shut down this entire operation. As evening approached and the last of the evidence was collected, Zara found herself alone with Charles in the house that had been their prison and was now their liberation. How are you feeling? Charles asked gently. Like my entire life just turned inside out, Zara replied honestly. This morning I was married and living a lie. Tonight I'm single and free, but I don't know what that means yet. It means you get to decide what comes next, Charles said. Without anyone manipulating you or using you or taking advantage of your kindness. What about you? How does it feel to finally stop pretending? Charles stretched his arms and took a deep breath. Like I can finally live again. For 2 years I've been trapped in my own body, watching people I trusted destroy everything I'd worked for. But I'm free now, and more importantly, so are you. Charles, Zara said carefully, what happens to us now? I mean, I've been living in your house, married to your son, taking care of you under false pretenses. You've been taking care of me under completely honest pretenses, Charles corrected her firmly. Your motivations were pure, even if everyone else's were corrupt. And as far as I'm concerned, you're welcome to stay here as long as you want while you figure out your next steps. I can't impose on you like that. You're not imposing, Charles said with a smile. Your family. The only real family I've had in this house for a very long time. As they prepared for bed, Charles in his own bedroom for the first time in 2 years, and Zara in a guest room rather than the master bedroom she'd shared with Brandon, both of them felt the strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration that comes with surviving a major crisis. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Legal proceedings, media attention, and the complicated process of rebuilding their lives. But tonight, for the first time in years, both Charles and Zara went to sleep feeling safe, vindicated, and hopeful about the future. The people who had tried to destroy them were in jail, and justice was finally within reach. 3 weeks later, Zara sat in a federal courthouse wearing her best dress and holding Charles's hand as they waited for the sentencing hearing to begin. The past month had been a whirlwind of depositions, interviews, and legal proceedings, but today would finally bring closure to their ordeal. Brandon, Patricia, and Dr. Morrison sat at the defendant's table with their lawyers, looking nothing like the confident conspirators who had planned to steal Charles's life. Patricia had aged 10 years in 3 weeks, her hair now completely gray and her face drawn with stress. Brandon stared at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Dr. Morrison just looked defeated. All rise for the Honorable Judge Martinez, the bailiff announced. Judge Martinez was a stern woman in her 60s who had built her reputation on tough sentences for white-collar criminals. She'd reviewed the case thoroughly and was clearly not impressed with what she'd found. Be seated, she said, settling behind her bench. We're here today for the sentencing of Patricia Pierce, Brandon Pierce, and Dr. Harold Morrison, who have all pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The plea deals had been arranged by Detective Rodriguez and the federal prosecutors. In exchange for guilty pleas and cooperation in identifying other victims, the defendants would avoid trial but still face significant prison time. Before I announce the sentences, Judge Martinez continued, I want to hear from the victims. Mr. Charles Pierce, would you like to make a statement? Charles stood slowly, his dignity and strength evident in every movement. For 2 years he'd been silent while these people destroyed his life. Now finally he had the chance to speak. Your Honor, he began, his voice clear and strong, I spent 30 years working as a police detective, protecting people from criminals who prey on the vulnerable. I never imagined that the people who would ultimately victimize me would be my own family. He turned to look directly at Patricia and Brandon. For 2 years, I watched you steal my money, forge my signature, and plan to abandon me in a state facility while you fled the country with everything I'd worked for. But what hurt most was watching you manipulate and abuse Zara, who gave up her own life to care for me with genuine love and dedication. Patricia was crying now, but Charles continued without mercy. You turned my home into a prison, my family into a lie, and my life into a performance. You stole not just money but time, dignity, and trust. The only thing that gave me hope during those 2 years was watching Zara's kindness and knowing that real goodness still existed in this world. He sat down and Judge Martinez nodded approvingly. Ms. Zara Pierce, would you like to speak? Zara stood on shaking legs. Public speaking had never been her strength, but she had things that needed to be said. Your Honor, she began, I believed in marriage. I believed in family. I believed that love meant sacrifice and dedication. These people used those beliefs against me to turn me into free labor while they lived a life of luxury and deception. She looked directly at Brandon, the man she'd once loved enough to marry. You made me feel like I was nothing without you. Like I was lucky you put up with me. You isolated me from my friends, convinced me to give up my career, and made me dependent on you emotionally and financially. All while you were cheating on me with your stepmother and planning to destroy my reputation. Brandon finally looked up, tears streaming down his face. Zara, I'm sorry. I never meant. Don't, Zara said firmly. You don't get to apologize now. You had 2 years to tell me the truth. 2 years to treat me with respect. Instead, you chose to use me and humiliate me and plan my destruction. She turned to Patricia. And you used my compassion against me. You made me feel guilty for every moment I wasn't devoted to Charles's care, while you were stealing from him and planning to abandon him. You taught me that kindness was weakness, but you were wrong. Kindness is strength, and it's what allowed me to see through your lies and help bring you to justice. As Zara sat down, Judge Martinez reviewed her notes. The impact statements from other victims tell a similar story. Patricia Pierce, your fake charity scam stole over $50,000 from people trying to help disabled veterans. Brandon Pierce, your embezzlement left 12 families without health insurance, causing them to miss medical treatments and accumulate debt they couldn't afford. She looked directly at the defendants. Dr. Morrison, your fake medical credentials could have resulted in serious harm or death to vulnerable patients. The three of you represent everything wrong with white-collar crime. You used positions of trust to prey on the people who should have been able to depend on you most. Patricia Pierce, Judge Martinez announced, you are sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You will pay full restitution to all victims, including Mr. Charles Pierce and Ms. Zara Pierce. Patricia sobbed openly as the sentence was read. Brandon Pierce, you are sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You will also pay full restitution and are banned from working in any position involving financial management. Brandon's shoulders shook, but he remained silent. Dr. Harold Morrison, you are sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and are permanently banned from representing yourself as a medical professional in any capacity. As the defendants were led away in handcuffs, Charles squeezed Zara's hand. It's over, he said quietly. It's over, she agreed. Outside the courthouse, Detective Rodriguez met them with news about the financial recovery. We've traced most of the stolen money, he told them. Charles, you should recover about 90% of what was taken from you. Zara, there's also going to be a substantial settlement from the insurance companies that were defrauded. You'll both be financially secure while you rebuild your lives. What about the house? Zara asked. It's yours free and clear, Charles, Detective Rodriguez confirmed. All the fraudulent mortgages and liens have been removed. As they walked to Charles's car, Zara felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of deception, manipulation, and fear had been lifted from her shoulders. She was free to be herself, to make her own choices, to build a life based on truth instead of lies. Charles, she said as they drove home, I want you to know that taking care of you these past 2 years wasn't a burden. Even knowing what I know now, I don't regret the time we spent together. Neither do I, Charles replied. In fact, I think it might have been the most important time of both our lives. Why? Because it taught us both what real family looks like, he said with a smile. And now we get to choose how to build that family going forward. That evening, as they sat in Charles's living room, no longer a prison but a home again, both of them felt the profound peace that comes with justice served and truth revealed. They had survived the worst that betrayal and cruelty could throw at them. Now they were ready to discover what the best of life had to offer. 6 months after the sentencing, Zara stood in her new office, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The sign on her door read, Zara Williams, Senior Graphic Designer, and she smiled every time she saw it. She'd taken back her maiden name after the divorce was finalized, and with it, she'd reclaimed her identity. The settlement money from the insurance fraud case had given her options she'd never dreamed of having. Instead of looking for another job working for someone else, she'd started her own graphic design firm specializing in websites and marketing materials for small businesses. It was challenging, exciting, and entirely hers. "Knock knock," Charles said from the doorway carrying 2 cups of coffee. "How's the empire building going?" "Very well," Zara grinned, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I just finished the logo design for that new restaurant downtown, and I have 3 new clients starting next week." "I'm proud of you," Charles said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "You've built something amazing here." Charles had become more than just a friend or father figure. He'd become her business partner and biggest supporter. With his background in investigation and her skills in design, they'd discovered they made an excellent team. Charles handled the business management and client relations while Zara focused on the creative work. "Any word from Detective Rodriguez about the appeal?" Zara asked. "All 3 appeals were denied," Charles said with satisfaction. "Patricia, Brandon, and Dr. Morrison will serve their full sentences. Rodriguez also told me they've identified 6 more families who were victimized by similar schemes. Our case is helping bring justice to a lot of people." The success of their business had been featured in several news articles about fraud survivors rebuilding their lives. Zara had been nervous about the media attention at first, but it had actually brought them new clients who appreciated working with people who understood the importance of trust and integrity. "Speaking of Detective Rodriguez," Charles said with a knowing smile, "isn't he taking you to dinner tonight?" Zara blushed slightly. Miguel Rodriguez had asked her out 2 weeks after the sentencing was complete, and they'd been dating steadily ever since. He was kind, honest, and treated her with the respect she'd forgotten she deserved. "Yes, and before you ask, it's going very well," she said. "He makes me laugh, he listens to me, and he never makes me feel like I need to be anything other than myself." "That's how it should be," Charles said warmly. "You deserve someone who appreciates what an incredible woman you are." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the real door. Zara's assistant, a young college student named Amy, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman here who says she needs to speak with you urgently about a family situation. She seems really upset." Zara and Charles exchanged glances. Over the past few months, they'd been contacted by several people who suspected their own family members of financial fraud. Their story had given other victims the courage to come forward. "Show her in," Zara said. The woman who entered was in her 40s, well-dressed but clearly distraught. Her hands were shaking as she introduced herself as Maria Santos. "I saw your story in the newspaper," she began without preamble, "about how your family was stealing from you and faking medical conditions. I think the same thing is happening to my mother." For the next hour, Maria told them a story that was heartbreakingly familiar. Her mother had suffered a stroke 2 years ago and required care. Maria's brother had convinced her to let him handle their mother's finances while Maria provided the daily care. Now Maria suspected her brother was stealing their mother's money and planning to move her to a cheap facility while keeping the insurance payments for himself. "The worst part is, I think my mother is more aware than my brother claims," Maria said through tears. "Sometimes I catch her looking at me like she wants to tell me something, but she can't speak clearly anymore." Charles leaned forward. "Maria, would you be willing to let us help you investigate this situation?" "How?" "We've learned a lot about documenting financial fraud and building evidence for legal action," Zara explained. "If your brother is stealing from your mother, we can help you prove it." "But I can't afford to hire investigators or lawyers," Maria protested. "We're not asking you to pay us," Charles said gently. "We're offering to help because we know what it's like to feel helpless while someone you love is being victimized." Over the next 3 weeks, Charles and Zara worked with Maria to gather evidence of her brother's theft. They taught her how to document financial irregularities, how to record conversations legally, and how to protect herself from retaliation. When they had enough evidence, they introduced her to Detective Rodriguez, who helped her build a case that resulted in her brother's arrest. "We should formalize this," Zara said to Charles after Maria's case was resolved. "Create a non-profit organization to help other families dealing with elder fraud." "I was thinking the same thing," Charles agreed. "We have the skills, the experience, and the resources to make a real difference." 6 months later, the Charles Pierce Foundation for Elder Justice was officially launched. The foundation provided free investigative services, legal support, and emotional counseling for families dealing with financial abuse of elderly relatives. It was funded partly by the settlement money from their own case and partly by donations from people who'd heard their story. 5 families helped in our first month, Zara announced at their monthly board meeting. And we've recovered over $300,000 in stolen funds. More importantly, Charles added, we've kept 5 elderly people out of facilities where they would have been neglected or abused. The foundation's work was demanding but deeply satisfying. Every family they helped reminded them of how far they'd come from those dark days when they'd felt trapped and helpless. One evening, as they were closing the foundation office for the day, Charles turned to Zara with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Walking away from the simple life you had before? You could have just divorced Brandon quietly and moved on without getting involved in all this. Zara considered the question seriously. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I'd never found out about their scheme. But then I realize I would have been living a lie forever. And we never would have helped all these families. Plus you never would have met Miguel, Charles pointed out with a grin. Plus I never would have discovered I could run my own business, Zara added. Or that I was strong enough to fight back when people tried to destroy me. You were always strong enough, Charles said. You just needed the right circumstances to discover it. As they walked to their cars, Zara reflected on how completely her life had changed. A year ago she'd been isolated, manipulated, and living in fear of losing the little security she had. Now she was successful, independent, and surrounded by people who valued and respected her. Charles, she said as they reached their cars, thank you. For what? For trusting me with the truth. For including me in your plan. For showing me that family isn't about blood or marriage, it's about people who choose to love and protect each other. Thank you, Charles replied, for reminding me that kindness and integrity still exist in this world. And for proving that the best revenge against people who try to destroy you is living a life so successful and happy that their worst efforts become irrelevant. 6 months later, Miguel proposed to Zara on the beach where they'd had their first date. She said yes immediately, knowing she was choosing a partner who would be her equal and her support, never her controller or manipulator. Charles walked her down the aisle at their wedding, beaming with pride as he gave her away to a man who would cherish her the way she deserved. In his speech at the reception, he told the guests that watching Zara find true love was the best possible ending to a story that had begun with betrayal and heartbreak. The Charles Pierce Foundation continued to grow, helping dozens of families and recovering millions of dollars in stolen funds. Charles and Zara's story became a symbol of hope for people who thought they were powerless against those who would exploit them. Patricia, Brandon, and Dr. Morrison remained in federal prison, their appeals exhausted and their reputations destroyed. Their attempts to steal everything from Charles and Zara had backfired completely, leaving them with nothing while their intended victims thrived. 5 years after that horrible day when Zara discovered the truth about her marriage, she stood in the nursery of her new home, decorating for the baby she and Miguel were expecting. Charles sat in the rocking chair, assembling a crib and telling stories about the adventures their foundation had shared. I have a confession, Charles said as he tightened the last screw on the crib. When I first started planning my revenge against Patricia and Brandon, I was motivated by anger and hurt. I wanted to make them suffer the way they'd made me suffer. That's understandable, Zara said, hanging tiny clothes in the closet. But somewhere along the way it stopped being about revenge, Charles continued. It became about justice. About protecting other people from going through what we went through. About building something positive from something terrible. Is that what you think we did? Built something positive? Charles looked around the nursery bright, cheerful, and filled with love, then at Zara, glowing with happiness and pregnancy. I think we built everything good that can come from everything bad, he said. And I think that's the best possible victory. As Zara felt her baby kick and looked forward to introducing her child to the grandfather figure who had saved both their lives, she knew Charles was right. They hadn't just survived their ordeal, they transformed it into something beautiful. The people who had tried to destroy them were forgotten, while they had built a legacy of love, justice, and hope that would continue long after they were gone. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.